everyone, and welcome back to another book review. Today, I am going to be reviewing Volume 6 in the series, The Remarried Empress, which I have been reading for a while, and I am loving this series. I'm going to be giving a recap of the series so far. I'm going to be discussing what happens in Volume 6, as well as my thoughts and feelings. I love this volume. I think things happened in this volume that have needed to happen for a while, and I'm excited to dive in. First, as a just brief overview, my library puts these stickers on the cover of books sometimes when they're ordered from another library, so the cover isn't very physically attractive to look at, which is unfortunate because the picture is Navier, the Empress, and it's covered up by this massive sticker. So that aside, I'm just going to talk with my hands and only hold up the book occasionally. That is why. The Remarried Empress. Let's do a little bit of a recap of the series thus far. We are following an emperor and an empress of this fantasy kingdom, which is it's like the Western European style inspired fantasy, and our emperor is named Sovieshu and our empress is Navier. So these two individuals are married, and they've been known they were going to be married since they were children, so this is a marriage that was definitely from convenience, or not just convenience, but what was good for the nation. And Navier and Sovieshu have both been raised from a very young age to know that these are their duties. Knowing that they entered as a marriage of what's best for the nation and being a good pair for each other, there was deep concern and care for each other, especially at the beginning, but there wasn't necessarily love between these two. It wasn't a love story. And so Sovieshu took a mistress. This is well within the rights of this world that we are living in. And with Sovieshu taking a mistress, it is understood that while he may not have an official title, or I guess she may not have an official title, the Empress is also entitled to take someone on the side as well. Basically, because they have this marriage, they're allowed to take someone on the side more for passion or romance or love aspect, just due to the nature of their marriage. Makes sense. Sovieshu, though, quickly elevates his mistress in giving her more attention and more care and sort of usurping the role of Empress through his mistress. And this is a bad idea for a number of reasons. First of all, it's sort of callous in his relationship with the Empress, but he also becomes very, very jealous of any men who are talking to the Empress, which is a double standard which does not exist in this world. I understand in maybe real medieval times that double standard did exist, but in this land at least, it's implied that the Empress does have the right to also speak to people who she's passionate about, as long as it's discreet. The Emperor, Sovieshu, is not being discreet. He has elevated his mistress, Rashta, who is quite cruel and conniving, but not well trained in the world of like statescraft, which is where the Empress really shines. And so we have this cruel mistress who the Emperor is acting kind of inappropriately with, as in appearing at formal functions with her and kind of elevating her above what the Empress is, and the Empress knows that things are not going well. Another wrinkle to this is that the Emperor and Empress, Sovieshu and Navier, have not produced an heir. So one of them is infertile, or that's the belief. And Sovieshu and Rashta fall pregnant. Well, only Rashta has fallen pregnant, but Rashta becomes pregnant with presumably Sovieshu's child. And this causes concern because if that child is born of the mistress, it is not a legal heir to the throne. So Sovieshu develops this plan, which is completely idiotic, and we'll talk about that in a minute, in which he's going to divorce Navier, even though Navier has been trained her entire life to be the Empress, is doing a fantastic job managing the empire, and hasn't even demanded that she gives up the mistress, just demands to be treated with respect as the Empress. Sovieshu is going to divorce her, and that way legitimize the heir that's going to be born through Rashta. He has this idea that Navier is going to have no plans of her own and will just sit around divorced until Sovieshu calls her back and remarries her, making a legitimate heir for the throne, and also kind of playing both sides, getting to have his cake and eat it too, basically. Navier, however, has developed a correspondence and a relationship with Henry, who is a neighboring kingdom's king. He was just in line for the throne, but with the death of the king in that country, in that nation, that kingdom, Henry becomes king, and So they have a developing relationship, which comes to a head in volume 6. So in volume 6, we see the request for divorce go forward. So Sovyeshu has decided to go forward with his divorce. He needs to, of course, marry Rashta before the child is born to legitimize the child. There are other minor players in the background who are still trying to control Rashta. She comes from a peasant background, and she is therefore susceptible to maybe some control from people who previously owned her, because she was like in a slavery, or I forget exactly what her situation was, but there's people who have control over her and also are hiding her secret that she had a child with another man, and that child is currently not living with Rashta. Sovyeshu moves forward with the divorce, and Navier has two options. She can just accept the divorce as is, or she can fight it. Now, she can fight it and try to get concessions, but it's implied that the emperor will get his way. He will get the divorce, but Navier can kind of fight this thing all the way through. And you can tell that the high priest, who's part of this whatever religious complex we're existing in, it's a Catholic Church parallel, wants the Empress to fight because he finds this whole situation sort of baffling. Navier, though, decides to accept the divorce and only asks for permission to remarry. She's, of course, divorced at this point because she has accepted the divorce, but right after accepting the divorce, she requests the high priest marry her and Henry. This was a pre-agreed upon plan, and that would leave her as the queen next to Henry, and Sovyeshu is floored. Sovyeshu did not see this coming. He's very upset, and he's starting to realize his problems as he quickly moves to try to stop Navier's marriage to Henry. He's very upset with the fact that he, one, has lost Navier. He was hoping Navier would just kind of play her part in his big scheme, but she didn't do that. She isn't sitting around waiting for him to call her back. In fact, he has lost a very capable statesperson in his cabinet. She was part of managing the affairs. She's lost that. He's lost that. Rashta cannot take over. There's, of course, this heir that he's trying to legitimize, but he is also he wants to have his mistress, but he also wants to retain control over Navier, and having divorced her, he now has no say. He is not her emperor, or he is her emperor, but he is not her husband, and she can choose to remarry. That isn't disallowed. So she has married Henry. He being Sovyeshu, has blocked Navier and has kind of imprisoned her in her estate, but she is able to escape at the end of this and joins Henry in his kingdom, and now there is a lot of problems on everyone's hand. Well, Navier has some problems. Most of the problems are on Sovyeshu's plate, and I don't really care because I don't like Sovyeshu. So let's get into some thoughts. There were some aspects of this. There are many aspects of this that I really liked. The divorce has been a long time coming. Sovyeshu is starting to reap consequences, and we're starting to see Navier's patience pay off. Navier has kind of been on the receiving end of all of this cruelty from Rashta and poor treatment from her husband, the emperor, and has been kind of having to bide her time and wait patiently, and everything is starting to come to a head. You get the sense that Sovyeshu was not expecting her to find someone so quickly and wants to maintain control over Navier while also having this heir through Rashta and also maintaining a relationship with Rashta. I kind of like that Sovyeshu is kind of starting to have to deal with the consequences of his own actions, and he dug this grave. This is his problem, so he's going to have to start dealing with this, and he's very upset that he's losing control in certain aspects. I liked at the very end of this book, we'll just start there, there's like a good job of the artist of implying this sense as she's secretly moving through the countryside towards the Western Kingdom. Is she safe yet? Is she safe yet? Is she safe yet? You never really know if she's fully escaped the grip of Sovyeshu until she meets Henry and they move into they go back to her new capital, and she's going to resume her duties. I like the idea that there's definitely feelings between Henry and Navier, but they understand that this marriage right now is also a convenient marriage for Navier. Navier is doing this because it's what's expedient and best for her position and what she can do. And Navier kind of always has this level head about her in a way that the men in her life, Sovyeshu, Henry, do not. So she's maintaining a level head throughout all of this, and it contrasts nicely with Rashta, who is just basically a mess. And I feel like, and I've talked about this in previous reviews, we could feel bad for Rashta perhaps, but I do not, because I understand Rashta maybe could have been in a position where there's an imbalance of power. The emperor has taken a liking to you, who's a peasant, I think she may have even been a slave. And so do you really have the right to refuse? Maybe not, depending on how the power is arranged in this fantasy world, but you do not have to be cruel about it. You do not have to act in the ways that Rashta has, so I do not particularly care. I like the struggle between monarchy and church. I feel like I've been on a medieval history kick lately in my nonfiction reading, and you definitely notice in that time period there was this push and pull on who had more power, the monarchy and the church. Some very common examples include is it Charlemagne being crowned by the Pope, and then we have the Holy Roman Emperor and their relationships with the Pope, and we have, of course, King Henry, not from this book, but in history, who created his own Church of England, essentially because the Pope was not willing to grant him his requested divorce or annulment from a wife that he didn't want to be married to anymore. So I see a lot of parallels in history to what's happening here, where the high priest and the temple, which is just the Catholic Church stand-in, in some cases can overrule the emperor, in this case saying that no, the emperor cannot prevent Navier from remarrying because she is a free woman in the sense that she doesn't have any binding to Sovyeshu, and Sovyeshu is desperately trying to dig through legal precedent at the end of this volume to find a way to stop this remarriage because he doesn't like it. But I like the power play that's going on here, and we're starting to see the role that maybe the temple can play and things that Navier can do through this religious institution to maintain her position. One thing that I think Sovyeshu really messed up on is the crux of this issue, or what he's using as the crux of this issue. It's not really the crux of this issue, but he's saying, well, Navier hasn't given me an heir, and producing an heir for the throne is very important, which is true. They have a relationship that Navier has been trained to do and Sovyeshu has been trained to do. They're married for the good of the empire, let's be clear, and that involves producing an heir. And we come to find out that there may have been some substances consumed as younger children that would have led to infertility, basically. There's some backstory that's given. But Navier in all of this has been very level-headed, very understanding of her position in all of this, and definitely understands the severity of situations like this. Navier would not have been so... I don't think she would have been how do I say this correctly? She would have been open to ideas on how to fix this heir situation or how to take care of this heir situation. She's been trained her entire life. She knows the importance of this. If it's true that she cannot have children, then she would definitely have to be open to ideas on how to secure succession to the throne through whatever means, maybe producing an heir, or maybe just naming an alternate line of succession, whatever had to be done, because that's not keeping in Navier's character to just be completely irrational about this subject when she's being quite rational about everything else in her life. So I think that situation, if Sovyeshu had thought about it, would have realized that he could have still had a mistress. That really wasn't the crux of the issue. He could have just allowed Navier to maintain a relationship on the side. He could have approached this clearly instead of creating this plan in which he would still maintain control over a divorced wife because he assumed she had nothing else going for him. And he was wrong, and I'm very glad that he's having to face the consequences of his action. I really loved this book. I think in Volume 6 we're seeing Navier executing on plans that she's made and has been at for a while. So I like her storyline moving along. Rashta didn't feature quite as much, but we see that she's definitely not still acting appropriately. And Sovyeshu is starting to realize how much he lost in Navier when trying to take Rashta on as the role of Empress, in which she has not been prepared for, which is not, again, entirely her fault. She wasn't raised in an environment that was built to set her up for success as an Empress, but Sovyeshu, in his short-sightedness, has now put himself in a very difficult situation that we're going to see play out. I also think that some of the loyalties of people in the kingdom and the kingdom that Navier is in now and that Sovyeshu still rules over is going to become very interesting, because the people, it seems, loved Navier, but now they feel like maybe there's a level of betrayal involved, that she has gone to a different kingdom to marry, but also why would the emperor divorce the empress? There's a lot of confusion at the common folk level, and I'm interested in seeing what happens in Volume 7. So if you have read Volume 6, please leave your thoughts and comments in the comment section down below. I love to receive your thoughts and comments. You can watch all the reviews of all the previous volumes on my channel, so please do check those out if you want. I also have reviews of all sorts of other manga and webtoon series, so check those out if you are interested. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope you have a great rest of your day.